ready to get started. At this time, I'd like to call to order the Carson City Audit Committee. If we could take roll call.
Chairperson Bertrand.
Here.
Vice Chairperson Prowse.
Here.
Member Bagwell.
Here.
Member Leonard.
Here.
Member Sonata. A quorum's present.
All right, thank you. Okay, the public's invited at this time to comment on and discuss any topic that is relevant to or within the authority of the Carson City Audit Committee. In order for members of the public to participate in the committee's consideration of an agenda item, the committee strongly encourages members of the public to comment on an agenda item during the item itself. No action may be taken on a matter raised under public comment unless the item has been specifically included on the agenda as an item upon which action may be taken. Is there any public comment at this time? Okay. Going on to item 4, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes. I second it.
Okay. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. Minutes approved. Item number 5, adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I'll move to adopt the agenda.
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda accepted. Item number 6. At this time, we're going to be looking at our current audit work program. Moss Adams is going to make a presentation to let us know exactly what is happening in our current work program, and I believe that's you've given us a document here. I guess would this be part of the internal audit status report that you've got? Great. Okay. So at this time, Mark, could you kind of give us your report?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and other members of the Audit Committee. Mark Steranker from Moss Adams, your internal auditor. So you should have a 2-page status report in your packet, and really 3 sort of activities to report on. I'll sort of take them each sort of holistically. So the first item is basic internal auditor services. So that's just the line item that is for committee meetings, board meetings. You see in the second section the budget status of that, how much expended through February 28th is certainly not correct. That should be through October 31st. My apologies. So the budget for that amount is $10,100 spent through October. The second item and really first project is the policies and procedures update. And so we are working with the city primarily through the finance department, because the focus of this work is on financially related policies, but policies that are not only within the finance department but affect the city as a whole. So finance policies affect things that happen in other departments, such as contracting or AR or things like that. And so what we're going through a process that we've done with other municipalities is inventorying the policies, comparing the existing policies against best practices in terms of comprehensiveness. I won't say so much level of detail, but you're looking for coverage, and in the process of all that, of going through that, also looking at when were they last revised. So is a policy last revised in 1988, 2008, 2014, et cetera, and coming up with an inventory to be able to help the city make decisions about what policies don't exist, perhaps, that we would want to exist, aren't as complete as we want to and might be expanded, are out of date and might need to be updated, or are fine just the way they are. And so we'll go through that process of inventory, best practices, and then collectively make a prioritization of where the efforts for policy and procedure development should be defined moving forward, as part of that being an ongoing update process. And so this project is mostly in doing the items that I described, the inventory, the comparison to best practices. We'll end up delivering what we would consider a table of contents, and then a sequencing and organizing of policies to work on moving forward. And then the city will make decisions on, okay, what should we work on and when? What's the best way to resource that? If there are things that we can help with to get them started, we will. We can't be the final pen on any policies and procedures because we can't audit our own work, but we can certainly help get things started. And we may not be needed to do any of that. So that's just a resourcing issue. We're doing the same thing with 3 or 4 other cities right now. So that's progressing well. So we've reached out to the departments. We've been gathering policies, starting to build the inventory, moving towards a draft table of contents that then we'll compare to best practices, and then we'll collectively start to define what a work program looks like moving forward that's going to happen on an ongoing basis. Questions? Sure.
Have you got a number of policies out there that you're working with? I mean, finite number?
Well, there is a finite number. I don't know what it is, but it's in the dozens, not hundreds. But I don't know. Do you have any guess? You can say no.
No. It's probably in the, I don't know, 50 range?
Yeah, I would think something on that order.
Just for finance or citywide?
Financially related policies, right. So not just for the finance department, but financially related policies.
Okay.
That makes sense? Yeah.
And so that would be inclusive for all the various departments, or are you kind of covering the entire city?
Yeah, so the key is that, and it's this way with any city, you're not just developing policies for the finance department, you're developing policies that are for the finance department and the financial activities that happen within other departments. And so as part of that, you're looking at, okay, what policies exist, for example, in public works that might be relative to financial activities that may be supplementary to, could be in conflict with, probably not, or lack thereof of direction for something. So it's just, you got to get a sense of the landscape and what all is there so that you know what your starting point is. We can collectively work on what a finished point might look like, and then what's the work program to do that. And really, again, the intent here was to get that process started in earnest and sort of get the wheel turning, and then, but by definition, that is an ongoing activity that, sort of a policy should be reviewed every so often, and we'll be working on defining that too.
Have you found instances where there is no policy?
I would say it's too early to say that because we haven't done a full inventory. So I honestly don't know what we have versus what we don't have as yet, because I know we're still getting some information. So we're just unfortunately a little too early. I suspect there'll be some, right?
And so these policies and procedures, they basically would be incorporated, and that would really be the things we'd be looking at as internal controls to be taken a look at, correct? So in other words, if there's policies and procedures where there could be a deficiency in controls, it'll be highlighted or addressed in recommendations for policies and procedures. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Certainly controls will be an important part of the policy framework.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mark, can you
Yes.
tell us what role is it that you think the audit committee will play in any of those? Is it to help review them, to ensure internal controls are being met, or you think that'll mostly all be done internally and we'll just see an end result of like a spreadsheet that lists all of the procedures and that they were reviewed and what date they were adopted and updated? And so what role is it that you see?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Not that this makes the answer right, what other cities do, but generally the role is the latter, which is there's direction from the audit committee that, hey, we want to make sure as a city our policies and procedures are up to date. Here's an initiative to get that started. As we go through the process, getting an understanding of what amount of work exists to get the policies and procedures to where we want to, sort of at the current state, and then keeping an eye on our policies and procedures being updated on a timely basis moving forward. So I sort of see the audit committee there. I wouldn't say getting into a reviewing of them, although you have every right to, but that typically happens at a management level. And so that you're wanting to sort of canvass the landscape and make sure things are in place and things are happening on an ongoing basis, right? And versus, it's been I'm making this up, but it's been 7 years since we've updated a policy, right? So you would want to make sure moving forward that that's not happening as an audit committee. Sure. Other questions? So it's moving along. We're, as I said, working very closely with finance primarily, but also with the other departments. And so we'll have more to report next time we're together. Okay?
Do you have an end date?
We were shooting to have the priorities defined. We have here the status report in November. I'd say November, December, as far as having initial cut at what are the priorities for focus moving forward in terms of an inventory, comparing to best practices. So I'd say for sure by the next time that we meet, we'll have that to share. And then really from there should be the work program moving forward and what that looks like.
Okay, so basically, you're putting together an inventory.
An inventory and work program for filling gaps. So if you say inventory is what's in place, best practice is what could be in place. It doesn't mean we have to have everything, but whatever that gap is, making decisions about how much of that gap do we want to fill and what does the work look like to do that. And the gap might be missing, it might be out of date, it might need tweaking, whatever.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, should I move to the next project? Okay. So the next one is the cash and revenue collection improvement. So that one really just got started in earnest. You can see, for example, down below the budget expended, $1,750 out of $25,000. So what has happened to date is we've had a kickoff meeting with finance and the Treasury Department, where really the goal was focusing in on of the things that we could do relative to cash handling and revenue collection. What would be the most benefit to the city, leveraging what we've learned from the internal controls review? And so what we're really trying to focus in here is a deeper dive relative to what procedures are in place. This is, again, an across the city thing. That yes, a lot of that activity happens within the Treasury, but we obviously take cash in across the city in various departments. How much consistency, how much inconsistency do we have? What are the best practices that we want to move towards? And really focusing in on getting processes consistent, policies and procedures, which would be a tie back to the project I just referenced, in place, an ongoing process for doing monitoring and testing of cash handling, so that what we're doing now is making the step forward from, okay, so we know it's done inconsistently across the city. That doesn't make Carson City unique from anyone else in the U.S. What do we want it to look like? Where do we run into challenges of segregation of duties, for example, and how do we mitigate those? And so you might still have some variation, but variation that we acknowledge in our planning for or managing to, and then getting in a process for being able to monitor cash handling on an ongoing basis, whether that's city staff or internal audit, just that we have a program for doing that. And so it's, I would say in a way, it's implementation of recommendations. What we're trying to do is get things in place versus identifying more findings.
Okay, so are you doing, as part of your work on this, are you going to be doing some detailed testing where there could be findings? I mean, looking at transactions and...
We may do some detailed testing depending on, I guess in a way, depending on what we learn. If we feel like it's necessary and prudent to do, we may, but the end goal is really to get the consistent processes in place across the city, and testing would really just come into play if we think that there's something awry or something, there's a reason to go and really delve. I don't think that there's a need to delve in testing in terms of identifying the process. It would be more of looking at the results. Yeah, Bill.
It turns out that Supervisor Bagwell has, in the process, a reporting system for, how should I describe that?
Expenditures?
Well, no, your online access, open government.
Open, yep. eGov.
So this might impact your review.
It might impact that the public reviews is what I really think will happen, but I don't know if you're aware of it, but I
Not
think it's
specific here. no.
really something neat that our city's done for transparency, is we'll be putting up an open government, so the general public will be able to see our revenues, expenditures year-to-date,
This is the open
vendors,
checkbook.
the open
Yeah, yeah,
checkbook.
yeah.
So really pretty proud that the city's moving forward to be even more transparent. So it'll give everyone opportunities to see how we spend our money and how we receive money, so.
No, that's great. And so you think of it, so that's giving information at this level, right? But transparently. And so what we're doing is we're working on here, right, to make sure that what's here is accurate, right?
There's one thought as this goes on with our public. They identify issues or concerns. Where should they go to address them?
No, they have another great tool, Carson City Connect. So if they really have questions about the city or want answers to report issues, then they can use Carson City Connect. And we have a great system that the team, the proper team, so in this case, if it was a financial question, Nancy would take care of that. If it's a question about roads, Darren's team does a super job answering it. So it's another great technological tool. And I think it is a great internal control. I think that it allows the public access at all times and can ask questions and report issues. And they're developing some really good frequently asked questions based on those. So if you start seeing common questions coming in, then the city can write a frequently asked questions to try and answer them without requiring,
Sure.
somewhat staff time. But so that helps us develop those too. So I think we're definitely moving in the right direction. And I hope that they're public tools that everyone enjoys.
Great. Okay, so last activities are fraud, waste, and abuse program. Really just a quick update there. So since we last met, we've received 4 reports. 2 of them were clearly non-city issues, as they tend to be, not only here but elsewhere. One was a potential fraudulent or scam call to someone's home, trying to get their bank account information or something like that. One was a potential misuse of a debit card, not a city employee, not a city issue. One was a complaint or notification, whichever, regarding sprinkler usage, which was forwarded to Parks and Recreation, and then one was related to work done by the city, which we initially took a look into, kind of, I'll say, closed. We're gonna revisit it a little bit more. No details to report on, but those were the 4 that we received.
Okay, yeah, in thinking about it, and I know when we first started the fraud, waste, and abuse program, one of my concerns was that we really, a complaint doesn't get to us, or we don't hear too much about it until it's way down the line. And I think hearing some of these things that are going on, it would probably be good, and we'll probably have to put this as an agenda item so we can take action on it in the next meeting. But I would like to bring it up again. It would probably be good that before these complaints are closed, that a member of the audit committee has a chance to talk with you about it, because otherwise I think we as the audit committee can feel that you're going through these things and you close them before we have any information on it, and then the question is, well, how do we know if it's being handled properly or not? We might have some information or hear about something that we would like to say, hey, maybe that needs further investigation. So I'm just throwing that out there now. Are there any comments on it? I think really, again, we'll probably have to bring that up at the next meeting, because I think what we need to do is take action, and what we would be changing to the policies and the procedures for the fraud, waste, and abuse would be, before a complaint is closed, that a member of the committee, and for simplicity, probably, just make that the chairman, it's addressed to him, and he has a chance to say, yes, I think we're okay on that, or if he feels that, probably it's, there's somebody else on the committee that probably be better able to answer that, he can then just say, talk with that committee member before it's closed.
And I would just, my 2 cents, I think it's a great idea. I think there's always merit in a second set of eyes. So I think it would be a great addition to the procedure.
We are doing something a little bit like that with the CAFR review already. And we set up this process with the DA's office involvement. And there's a lot of concern about open meeting issues, but so I'm sure you'll get sucked into this also.
And I would just say it's an especially good idea because this activity does kind of live in a vacuum. And I'm sure it's somewhat uncomfortable from the audit committee side. It's somewhat uncomfortable for our side. And so I think it's a really good, call it check and balance, second set of eyes. It's just a sounding board, whatever, right? Because the structure is good for that. Who else might we ask, right, independently? It's tough to do. So again, I think it's a good decision. And actually, when we sort of talked about it a little bit, we may take it to some of our other cities as an idea, because none of them do it. And I think that it's a good idea.
Well, it's kind of like these complaints go into a black box, and we don't see anything. We just say it's either it comes out the other end to us, or else like you guys don't need to know about it. And there are some concerns we addressed why that is the case. There could be legal issues or whatever, blowing something up that really isn't there. But at the same time, I kind of think that the opposite side of that is sometimes things really need to be addressed, and we need to take a look at it. But again, that's great. We'll bring that up in the next meeting and do that, and then possibly add that to our procedure manual.
Yeah, and what we'll do in advance of that is look at, and maybe what we can prepare for that is the changes that we would propose to make to accommodate that, so that it can be dealt with at the same time.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Okay.
Who all knows about this program?
When you say program, you mean the fraud, waste, and abuse?
Fraud, waste, and abuse program, yes. Is it widely known there is such a program?
I think the answer is yes and no. Yes, in that there was training provided to city management. There was an online webinar made available for city employees. It's on the website. How aware people really are of it in reality, probably not so much, but it's not hidden, but people aren't, you have to, what do they say, you got to be reminded of things 6 or 7 times before, or so.
Okay.
The efforts have been made.
And that, as we're going through policies and procedures too, it's probably, I don't know if somewhere that's included in that, but it's probably things that department managers need to be looking at on an annual basis, and probably one of them is the address to fraud, waste, and abuse. I know as an auditor, we go out and we check to see, is that part of their controls, to bring that to the attention of their employees, that there is a program, this is where they can go. And like you say, you have to change over employees or people forget. So I don't know if that's part of your best practices, but since we're talking about it, may want to take a look at that on an annual basis. There could be just a checklist of things where they just somehow send out a memo or have a training thing or a webinar where everybody's being refreshed on that every year, so that they know that there's a hotline and what they can do. Otherwise, it goes by the wayside. It's like maintaining the work and the program we've set up. It's just a little bit of maintenance to keep it going so that we can have an effective program, and because it is an important control.
Yeah, and so along those lines, you're reminding me. So the webinar that we did was recorded, and that's posted on YouTube. I mean, that's where they go. It sounds silly to say, but it's there so that just what you described, Mr. Chair, can happen is that so the city can go to that resource at any time, right? So that could be part of, for example, just an annual program of reminding employees that that's available to them. Or, like for us as a firm, we have to go through a formal independence training every year. I'm not saying that the city needs to do that, but things like that are institutionalized, and so that was the reason that the webinar was recorded, so that resource is there and accessible by the city.
Well, and how about just seeing that it's in the new employee orientation manual? And maybe it already is, but it's certainly a place you can put that so that new employees are always informed that that's out there and it doesn't get missed in a training.
Again, this highlights, these are all part of the policies and procedures. Are we going to get a chance to sort of look at a sort of a summarization of that, or what some of the major recommendations are going to be on the policies and procedures? Or
you're not talking about fraud, waste, and abuse?
No. We're talking about, because that would be something you'd be including as you're going through and looking to see what the policies and procedures, all these things we're talking about would really be something of a policy and procedure to be included in there. Is that correct?
Yeah. So as we go through that process with largely the finance department, as we come, the outputs of that process, yes, will be, for example, what policies we could add, what policy might we expand to encompass something like this topic. So yes. Mm-hmm. So that was the update.
Any other comments or questions before we move on? Oh, any public comment at this time? Seeing none. Moving on to agenda number 7. Moss Adams will now present discussion possible action regarding the monitoring of the audit findings and the trackings report. If you can please give us a report on that.
Sure. So you should have in your packet, it's not a good version of it, but this is the cover page of your audit findings report. So quickly, just to call to your attention what has been updated since the last time we met. So the last update to this report was May 27th of this year. Since that time, excuse me, the CAFR findings and responses have been added to this report. The city management has made a comprehensive update to the actions that have been taken by the city in response to the findings. So what you see in your report, so the last, on the cover page, the last line item, FY 2014 CAFR, so that's been added. If you look down, about 6 columns over, the completed findings. So last time we met, that there were 30 completed findings by the city. So this findings, activities reported by the city as having addressed the findings. There are now 89. Just keep in mind that some of those will mean we've addressed the finding, and this doesn't include partial. There are a handful, I think, of partially completed findings. Some of the completed ones are the city has said we don't need to take action on that, or and so I think maybe that's not right. I'm trying to remember if the yes. I think just all the completed ones equal the 89. What was the other thing I was going to add? I don't know. I think that was it. And so, I guess the other thing is, and so you can see the pages that follow the summary sheet there's in essence a report for each one of the studies that was done. So each of the reports covered on the cover page, there's the supporting documentation that shows you the finding, the city response, the status, et cetera. And so each of the departments have reported back. And thank you to Nancy Paulson for being the funnel for that, to get that information back to us and incorporate it into this report.
Okay, I do have a question on, for
Sure.
example, we're looking at the fleet management efficiency study. So the report, there was 24 report findings,
Yeah.
and all of them have been completed and dealt with?
There were,
It says report findings were 24, completed findings are 24. Does that mean that all the findings that were reported have been addressed?
correct. And so if you go to that report, so you brought up a good example. So if you go to that report, page 1 of that fleet efficiency study has findings 1 through 5. If you see the finding corrected column, the 4th column from the right, page 6. Or, yeah, well, number page 6. It's probably page 7 in the packet. So there's a Y for yes in each of those. The next page, page 7, you'll see some that say administratively closed, and so that's where the city has said, and I would say that this is fine, that there are some things the city is going to choose not to do, and a number of those were discussed when this report was done, was presented in terms of what the city's philosophy was. So, for example, are we going to track something in a certain way? Are we going to track something in a certain level of detail? Are we going to, this might have been in the utilization study, are we going to create a loaner pool of vehicles? So there are things that were recommended that the city is not necessarily going to do. And so that's what some of these administratively closed are.
Okay, so I think then, I think the process then is, when we come up with some audit recommendations and the city decides this is what we can do, what we can't do, then the next step would be then to completely close this off, is then to bring this to the Board of Supervisors and basically give that, or has that already been reported to the Board of Supervisors that these were going to be closed? That this was going to be done, this was not going to be done?
I don't know the answer to that. I would say, I would guess no, but.
Because I think just to close the loop on this, because we eventually want to just get these things off. And like I said, as we've, it looks like we have some comments, some explanation. Go ahead.
There we go.
Darren Schultz, Public Works, for the record. So I can speak to the ones addressing fleet. So we brought the recommendation and our actions to the Board of Supervisors 6-8 months ago, and went through each one and gave them what we were doing and specifics of we're doing it, we've accepted it, or we can't do it, and this is why, or this is a financial hardship. We kind of had 3 categories. When we finished that presentation to the Board of Supervisors, the action was that report would be closed and moved off. So that's what we did.
Okay, thank you. So I think I was out of that loop. We were out of the loop. So I guess probably in the future, we just need to know what's happening, or that has to get communicated to us probably from our internal auditor, from us, Adams, so we know that action's been taken, that's taken care of. So then when this comes back to us, we say what's missing here is that this has gone to the Board of Supervisors. They've accepted
This resolution.
how they were going to resolve it, and then we can take this off our list. So I don't have to look at it, and I don't have to show this to the board next time I meet with them. So I guess at this point we can see that these ones that have been completed, and I guess almost finding, when it says administrative close, maybe we just add in there it's board accepted. Is
This
that?
column. Actually, column 2, where it puts Board of Supervisors acceptance approval. So the original date was 7/18/2013. We should add the date that the Board of Supervisors accepted the final report closing this fleet study. So all you need to do is add the secondarily date in that columns, and then, like you said, you can move it to like a second tab. These are all the closed ones versus that. So if you'll just update that second column.
Yeah, I think that
with
would be, yeah.
We can keep it tracking properly.
Because we want to see that when it's come on, when they've taken care, and that way too, if ever somebody has forgotten, let's say a member of the board has forgotten, well, what, it comes back up again, we have documentary evidence saying that it went to the board on this date, but also too, like I said, I think it would be good if this committee was aware of what was happening there, because I wasn't. I thought the process would be, once that came back, we would be making a presentation to the board. So, yeah, if we can have that final thing, then the next time we look at this report, these that have been completed and completely signed off are not going to show up on this report, correct?
Right, then they'd be we'd consider an archive.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Okay, good. Because we want to get this, we want to see that, we want to take a look and say, as we're expending money for our services and the time that's being spent, we want to see that there's a satisfactory resolution, that the board has had a chance to look at it, say yes or no, and then we take it off the list. So, okay, good. I think we're developing our system here. It's just a few little bumps in the road, but it's I think this is kind of like one of the last pieces of getting these things closed up and taken off. So going back to the ones that are closed, I think we have a few others like that then. So I guess what we're going to say that one we're saying is completely closed. Another one here is we're looking at there's the fleet utilization, so that goes in hand with that as well, correct? Because you did do that you did that study and you gave them the results, so we can just take that off the list. The other one, I guess those are the only two that really kind of come off. Completed findings. So if there's, for example, community facility cost recovery study, there's 15 findings and 13 are completed. I'm assuming then it's not that they've agreed to those 15, and until those are all taken care of, this will remain open. So because there's 2 items that are not completed, it's not because they've accepted not to do it. It's a matter of they've accepted that we're going to take some action on this, but they haven't completed it yet. Is that correct?
That's correct. In this case, they both happen to be identified as partial.
They're partial. Okay, good. So I just want to make sure I was clear on how we're reading this report. So going on down, employee efficiency study. Again, we have 27 report findings. So once we get those 3 additional findings resolved, then that will have been a completed project, correct?
Correct. And maybe a question back to the committee, moving forward, would you prefer, so like next time, for let's take the first one, community facility cost recovery study. Would you like the backup for that to just include the 2 that are open and put the 13 into the archive, or keep all 15 here until the 15 are complete?
Any thought? I guess I'm kind of thinking of keeping all 15 till it's done, and then that's it. Any other thoughts on that? What do you guys think? I guess it would be simpler in a way that if we deal with it each meeting, then we just have the ones that are open, and that way we're not getting so much paper. So I guess I'm open to some suggestions on that. What do you guys think?
Let me ask, did the 13 that are closed and completed, did those go to the Board of Supervisors? 'Cause I
don't know.
I don't recall that one coming to the Board of Supervisors. So I guess for me it gets archived once the Board of Supervisors has indicated acceptance of those. Because I worked with Parks and Rec a little bit to say, why don't we just go ahead and bring the 13 that are done, bring those to the board and say, this has been completed through the audit committee, has accepted these recommendations and discussions. Then we can accept it at the board level, and that's when it then gets the updated note in column 2 and goes to the archive tab. I just don't think they should come off of the radar till the Board of Supervisors has accepted those as closed audit findings. And then we would then next time just get the 2 that are pending. That's my thoughts.
I would have assumed that when these things went to the Board of Supervisors, that this committee would be involved. And if we object to the conclusions, we ought to make that clear, because some people don't want to be audited, by the way. So I think we need more involvement from this committee when those things are completed and go to the board.
Yeah,
This purpose.
yeah, and that's kind of what I was referring to before, that when some things went to the board and we hadn't had a chance to take a look at that. Yeah, when it says completed findings, so I guess based on the other thing, I thought completed meant it had gone to board. So I guess we do need to have this slightly expanded. When they've completed the finding, and then maybe just to have a column next to it, board approved, and then maybe what we can do is at that point, once it's been board approved and we've looked at it, one way or the other, either we look at it, I mean, I would think the proper order would be, once they have completed it, we hear about it, you report to us what they've done, and then if it goes to the board, that's fine, because if we feel like, hey, we think that their solution or their resolution isn't adequate, we would want to be there to present that to the board for their consideration as well.
And that makes sense, and that's why I've been conservative about taking things off of the report, so that making sure that something doesn't go away between one meeting and the next that you haven't seen. And so in this process, to me, in our involvement stops with the audit committee. The board part of it can refer back into it in terms of showing closed. But I guess you may want to look through this report before things start getting taken off and make that determination that you're comfortable with what's in here, or put another way, that you're satisfied with what the response is. Because let's take the fleet, for example. Well, the board's already approved that. So that's not the right example. The community facility cost recovery study, for example, to look at the 13. And if you have a concern about any of those, then you would want to convey that back to management, that, hey, we're not sure that this is doing what we think needs to be done to address the finding.
Yeah, I think looking at this report, so we can track it, we'd probably have a column that says completed findings by when you looked, you said the city has completed this particular thing, a column that the audit committee has signed off on it, and then a third column, board approval. I think once we got those three things checked off, then at that point it can then come off. So that would probably be just an expansion. So really you wouldn't take it off until, and then if there was an item where, I guess from what I've been hearing from others, once it's gone through all three, the city's done it, the audit committee's approved it, and the board of supervisors taken off, at that point we can take that comment off and just leave. So if there's 15 comments and 12 of them have been done, once it's gone through those three processes, then it could be taken off, and then just leave the 3 or 4 up there, so we're just focusing on the current stuff. I would say that probably you would leave on the next report when something's been completely signed off, so we would see on our, let's say for the next report, the fleet study, all 3 had been accepted. We would see that on the next report, all 3 accepted. Then the report after that, it would be gone. That way we could all see for ourselves that, hey, it's gone through the whole process. Or if somebody at that point might say, hey, I don't remember us really dealing with that. So does that make sense to possibly go that route? So I think to make the reports a little bit more meaningful for us.
I have a concern here that we don't lose the results of the work. When we say archiving, that can mean a lot of different things. And one of the nice things about going to the amount of trouble we're doing to keep track of this stuff is a certain number of audit deficiencies are repeated. It helps to go back, if down 5-6 years down the road, you go back in and say, what was the prior audit done here? What was the resolution? Here it is. Then you can go check that those things are still fixed. I think it would, and we need to have it available, if you will, wherever. And you don't need to send a report every period, but maybe annually. Give us a list of everything that's been done.
Sure. So just so you know what we mean when we say archive is that each of these reports has a tab. The summary sheet has a tab. Each of the reports has a tab. We'll have a tab that is closed or archived, whatever. And anything that gets closed and taking off this report will go into that tab so that we always have that retained.
You know, our vice chairman makes a real good point here, and I'm thinking for consistency and for as members of this committee change over years, it might be good if you send to me as the chairman the Excel spreadsheet, and that way I could keep that, and then when I'm replaced by another chair, I can just pass this information on so that we don't lose this institutional history that we're developing here. And that way, if anybody does have a question about it, we have an Excel spreadsheet that shows the buildup of what we've been doing. And we say, hey, I remember there's something that happened 5 years ago, and we can just quickly refer to it. But if it's on an Excel spreadsheet, if I actually have the Excel file, it's a whole lot easier than keeping all this paper.
Sure, and I'd say there's no reason that can't go to all the committee members. I mean, it's...
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Right. Yeah,
So I would just suggest that whenever we submit that report as part of an update, we provide the Excel and the PDF versions. We provide the PDF to make it easier for printing, but we just provide both so that you always have the electronic.
I had one other, a couple of observations. One had to do with the website where we've got the closed audit reports. The last entry in that was July 2013, and I think we have got a couple more completed since then, so maybe we could update the website. The other item I had was, this was part of my review of the CAFR with the external auditors. The partner indicated that there may be 2 or 3 of the findings from 2013 or 2014 that still may be outstanding this year. So in this case, we have them as all completed.
Excuse me, Bill, can we just wait till we get that agenda item?
Well, this all ties in with our tracking.
Directly? Okay.
Yeah, it's a
then.
matter of making a determination. In this case, it's going to the external auditor, I guess, who's making the determination. So, do you remember, did you talk to the external auditor on this?
No. However, you're bringing up a good point, which I've sort of have let go so far. So what this report reflects is 2 things, 2 primary things. There's the result of an assessment, we'll say, and so there are findings and recommendations. So that's sort of the input, and then the response to that is what management has said it's done or doing or will do regarding those findings or recommendations. What it doesn't do is provide a validation. Okay, so for example, I'm not promoting this, I'm just giving this as an example. At City of Stockton, as part of this process, the audit committee wanted the internal auditor to validate that the 2 things, that each activity was A, done, and B, had the impact to resolve the finding. They may have done something, but for example, as you were pointing out, the audit committee in this case might decide, or in our case as the internal auditor there, that yes, they did something, but it really didn't resolve the issue. It didn't strengthen the control, or it didn't strengthen it enough, or whatever. So Bill, the point that you're bringing up is what's reflected in this report is that management has said that we have completed the response to those 5 CAFR findings. And really and then the additional piece of it, it seems like you're saying is, but the external auditor might be saying, we haven't validated, or we don't believe that response has actually addressed the issue. And so all I'm trying to point out is that third piece of the equation really isn't reflected in this report. Does that make sense?
Yeah, in fact, because of the mandates of the external audits, is they're required to follow up on those. And generally, we're not. We are issuing the recommendations, and there's an acceptance by the board, by the department, and I'm not sure how much follow-up is appropriate. I don't, given where we are in this process, I think it's too early to do that. But in this particular case, that happened. And so as it turned out that maybe this was not really closed. So I understood what you were saying, and
Well, it's closed as far as, I'm speaking for management, but yeah, but as from management's perspective, you know, the two, I'll say, sort of reviews that you've suggested adding or to be able to capture is the audit committee review and the board of supervisors approval. You know, you kind of have, they're kind of parallel processes in a way, because that can happen, and the external auditor in this particular case can come back and at a later time and say, well, we don't think that it's addressed the issue, it's still a finding. When we do our audit report, our management letter, you know, the next go-round, in between, management may have, theoretically, management may have said we've completed it. The audit committee theoretically could have reviewed it and said, yes, it seems like it addresses. The Board of Supervisors theoretically could have reviewed it and said, yes, approved. And so it's gone through this, and the external auditor comes back and still has an issue. I mean, that could still happen. So I'm not sure that we can be perfect. Right.
okay.
So that was a long-winded answer to your question, but this does not reflect input from the external auditor to us, nor does it reflect input from Moss Adams on the adequacy of an action by management. Nor does it reflect the audit committees or the boards, except, let's say, for example, Fleet.
So maybe I'm lacking an understanding of a process here, but what I thought was going to occur today is this is an action item that indicates that we will be giving direction to send this to the Board of Supervisors, and I see that Parks is here. And so what I was assuming we were going to do is look at the completion date, and anything that was not addressed from a prior meeting that has an update, we would address as this committee, and that Scott would come up and do all the ones that had a July or November date, and we would either recommend it to be approved as stated, or we would reject it as this committee and say, no, we think that Parks and Rec needs to do a little more work on this, because I was assuming we were going to work to send 13 of these to the Board of Supervisors, or 12 or 10 or however many this committee liked. Because I also don't, personally, I don't want to leave this stuff in flex months and months and months on end, because we only meet quarterly. So isn't it that every quarter we should be accepting the reports from the city managers, should be getting up, or directors, and giving us the status update on any item in that quarter that has updated, and then we recommend either accepting it, sending it back to them for further work? Is that not a process?
I think that is a perfectly logical process. We have not done that to date. So that what you just described has never formally occurred. I'm not saying that as a bad thing, but I wouldn't say there's ever been a formal report necessarily to the audit, I think, I don't want to misstate, from management to the audit committee, such that you made a decision. I don't think that the audit committee has ever gone through this and said, yes, we agree. So what you said makes sense, but that has not happened yet. Doesn't mean that it can't happen in the future, but it hasn't happened yet.
Supervisor Bagwell does bring up, and I guess it kind of goes back to my earlier thoughts on how something got approved by the Board of Supervisors and didn't even get through us, so we didn't even hear about it.
But no, well, just so let's just go back to that to make sure we're clear. So if you look at, just go to the cover page, so the summary page, Board of Supervisor approval, and mind you, we've made tweaks to this as we've gone along, as we're doing today, which is all good. Board of Approval, so that definition is the date the report, so the report that's in here was approved adopted by the board. So the reason that that date is there, so what was happening earlier on was that a report would happen, get completed, it would come to the audit committee would accept it, by the structure, recommend it to the board. The board wouldn't necessarily take action on it. So that was a gap in the process. And so we were trying to make sure that the board was taking action on actually giving direction to receiving a report, adopting a report, giving direction to management to respond to the report, capturing the date that happened. So that's at the front end of the process. That has nothing to do with the board approving the result, the response by management. That hasn't been captured. That was one of the things that you suggested adding. So.
You know, maybe it would be helpful, let's just kind of just very quickly go through each of these, because it'll help us to understand. We'll take a look at the very first one. Let's say, for example, the Community Facility Cost Recovery Study. A report was submitted the 28th. Board approval, under that column, you have here in your legend, the date the report was adopted by the Board of Supervisors. Plan to implement. So on this one, we're missing a plan to implement. You know, I guess, but at the same time, there are some completed findings, so
Right, so there was never, I would say, a formal response from management to the board on what was going to be done. So, now, mind you, that was the first one, and we're still, everyone's sort of figuring out this process. So, for example, compare that to fleet, or the employee efficiency study, which are really in my mind, in a way, sort of the best examples. So let's talk about the employee efficiency study. So I remember your city manager, Nick, going through each item. Here, board, here's what we're planning to do on each one. So that was formally, a plan was presented to the board, and the board said, yes, go forward and execute that plan.
So, okay, well, let me just take them one by one real quick. So for the community costs, there wasn't a plan to implement. However, and there was 15 findings reported. They have gone ahead and worked on 13. So there's an implied acceptance of the recommendations, I'm assuming. But the question is, since there wasn't a plan, are they going to get the other two taken care of, or have they decided otherwise? So I guess my question on that would be, when can we get this one particularly resolved? And then we would have that column that would show that the audit committee has kind of gone through that line item. We've agreed with where we're at on things, and then when it goes to the board, it can then be closed after that. Does that sound like a good process? So on that one, what is the status on the two open items? What are the two open items here? What page would that be on? Page 7 and 8?
No.
Well, items number 7 and 8 on page 3. And so they're both indicated as partial complete. And the dates, so projected completion date is 2017 for one, 2016 for the other.
Okay. So really on that one, then I guess we say the status of that's partially complete. They're, in a sense, they've accepted that they're going to work on all the recommendations. So we just would keep those open until 2017, until that final is completed, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then going to the next one, then the Community Facility Cost Recovery Study, Eagle Valley Golf Course. Now, there was no date of board accepting it, but I thought that was all taken care of.
That one really has been resolved, and I didn't take it off here this time, just as kind of that conservative approach, because I guess I haven't felt like we've had as holistic a discussion about how we wanted to manage this. So I've just been keeping things on versus taking them off.
So maybe what we need to do is on an audit committee, then when we do come across these, then we just kind of basically, one of our actions would be to take something off if we felt that it's completed.
Right. And in this one, I would consider this complete. The board did not give any specific direction to management. Many of the findings or recommendations weren't really responded to because they were, I would say, overridden by renegotiation of the lease. Okay. And that really, as sort of an umbrella solution, took care really of the situation. And so in that way, in that sort of one action,
right,
it was completed.
Then probably at this point, then, I guess I would need a motion that, if somebody has a motion to go ahead and probably close this, unless there's, and...
Actually, I think that if we do our job correctly, we should see if there's any that they are administratively closing or putting, yes. So if we started with the community facility cost recovery study, is there any item on here that one of us would like Parks and Rec to come and discuss? Because I don't know that, I think they should all be closed. I think there's one that...
Yeah, and that's why I guess what I was going to do is I'm going to try to keep this with procedures. Make the motion second, then we start having our discussion, and then we then vote to close. I guess that would be the proper. So I guess right now we're having a discussion on this to see if we want to, if it's ready to close all of those.
Well, I don't want to do a motion yet.
Okay.
I think we need response from
Okay.
people in the audience before we would know what type of motion to even form. So for me, I'd like to discuss item number 9. So, and that would be Scott. Just a general question on item number 9. It's not complex.
Okay.
But before we just... So on item number 9 dealt with the advertising opportunities that we could explore. And so the RAC put the reader board out front. And so I would just like, before we close this one, did it meet the actual, how much money are we making off the reader board? Is it successful in assisting in doing the fundraising? So this would be the perfect example. Is the actual resolution that you recommended and implemented meeting what the actual audit recommendation was about?
Okay. For the record, Scott Fahrenbrick, Deputy Director, Parks and Recreation. We believe, based on numbers, that the reader board has given us a spike as far as getting the word out as far as events. I mean, a pretty significant spike. As far as the actual tracking of it, I can't give you a specific number or percentage, but we do know that, things have increased, and the other thing that it does is it saves a lot of staff time because it minimizes the number of phone calls and other contacts that people make because they don't have the information. A lot of people see that reader board sign going back and forth, and they know what's going on, not only at the community center, but at the ice rink downtown, different events, the Nevada Fair. During the course of the 2 Nevada fairs that we've had a significant amount of advertising for those fairs, and a lot of people have come to us and told us, well, we didn't even know anything about the fair until we saw it on the reader board sign in front of the community center. So that being said, that's been a big boon to staff as far as promoting events here at the community center. As far as the other marketing that we do, my disclaimer is that we're limited because of the staff that we have to dedicate to marketing. But that being said, we do marketing here for our facilities. The other things that we're looking at is looking at WNC, the Brewery Arts Center, other folks that can help us to that end as far as marketing goes. Carson City Convention, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, we look to them as well, not necessarily to mark to the residents, but to mark to the people who live outside of Carson City that don't know anything about our facilities and don't know anything about our events, and then that hopefully they get that information and they come enjoy our facilities.
So maybe just for me, because number 9 dealt with the initiatives for the theater, but when you read number 8, it's also specific to the theater. And so are we okay just leaving number 8 as the open pending item, and maybe pieces of 9 actually relate to the theater, and when the new construction gets done, that it'll all actually be incorporated for theater needs then? And so you're recommending closing 9 and just handling it all under number 8 after you do the corrections to the theater?
That would be our recommendation, and with number 8 is ongoing because we're researching, the social media and the online marketing, so that's an ongoing item.
Okay. And then just for the rest of the audit committee, one of the unique things for Parks and Rec is there is actually a separate board for Parks and Rec. And so they've also been looking and they work to achieving and doing some of these goals. And so I've probably seen these a few times under different committees. So I'm very comfortable with the responses that Parks has prepared on these and leaving just the 2 items open. The other one that we'll be working on that wasn't here during that time is costing and cost recovery for the MAC. So you'll see that the Parks and Rec Committee is working to help monitor these issues for cost recovery too. So if you're then ready for a motion, I'll be happy to make one.
Were you saying that the MAC was part of this?
No, I'm saying that it's also a cost recovery issue that's come up, but I wanted to let you know that the Parks and Rec Commission can pick that up with the theater, and those will just remain out as a pending review. And actually, probably when you're doing your policies and procedures, that's probably a perfect one to say it should be reviewed like every 3 to 4 years. It should go back to Parks and Rec and have cost recovery and pricing for all of our facilities monitored. And I think it's a great result from this whole process, and that's how you carry it through every piece that we've been talking about today. So I think it's a great one to put in for Parks and Rec to review the cost fees on all of the facilities, like I said, every 3 or 4 years, whatever you guys best practice determine that to be.
In advance of the motion, I'd just ask what the chair's pleasure is in terms of public comment. Are you going to, it's a single agenda item, but I think we're now looking at multiple motions. You could either take public comment in advance of the first motion on the entire agenda item, or you can choose to take public comment on each motion as it comes forward, but I just wanted to alert you to that before the first motion's made.
So what we could do is we could just ask for public comment at this point to just cover the entire thing. I mean, I guess my question is somebody might have a comment after discussion later. I guess they would still be making comment, but I guess at this time we can open it up for any comment before we go ahead and make a decision then, so.
You can do it that
right.
way if it's just made clear to the public that they're commenting on the entire agenda
Okay.
item, not just on the most immediate
Great.
motion.
Okay, well, then I'll go ahead and do that now. I think that'd probably be more efficient, that at this time, if there's any members of the public that would like to comment on any of these items, please come forward and do so now. Okay, looks like no comment, so I guess we're ready for a motion.
Okay, I'd like to move to approve the community facility cost recovery study, except for items 7 and 8 will remain pending, and the other 13 will be referred to the Board of Supervisors for final acceptance or action.
I'll second.
Okay, those all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passed. So what we're going to do is on that, I guess on the reporting then, the next time, once this, none of these have gone to the Board of Supervisors at this point, so we're going to be able to go to the Board of Supervisors on the 13. Once that's taken care of, we'll show that on the list that that's been taken care of. We've now seen that the Audit Committee has addressed it, the Board of Supervisors, and then after the next meeting then, there'll just be the 2 items, and we'll just keep just those 2 items on. So once it's gone through that process, that 3-step process, then we can take them off. Then let's go through each of these items, and next is the community facility cost recovery study, the golf course. It looks like that's all been resolved and taken care of. Is there any more comments on that, or can I have a motion to go ahead and close that item?
I'll make a motion to close the community facility cost recovery study for Eagle Valley Golf Course.
I second it.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Okay, motion passes. That is now closed.
So just for clarification, well, how do you want us to document that?
I think in the next report, you'll then show a column that thing has gone through the approval by the audit committee. It's also gone through the board of supervisors. We'll see it that next time, but then after that, we won't see it anymore.
Okay.
Just so that we can see at their next meeting that it has gone through all the processes and has been completely approved. That way, if anybody has any questions, they can deal with it on this committee at that time. But if we come back and we see it looks like it's been satisfactorily closed off, then after that, we can basically say it's archived. And maybe that will be the thing. Maybe in the future, we'll just have a motion that those things just be archived. Just all of those that have been completed, we'll just say, please archive those. That would probably be the best way to do it.
Okay, and so then what I'll probably try to do then for the Board of Supervisors date is the date that the board approved the contract for the golf course. Sound good?
That would be good.
Okay.
All right, then going on to the next item, fleet management and the utilization study. Do I have a motion to close that?
I'm going to make this one slightly different. I'd like to move the fleet management efficiency study and the fleet utilization study be archived, as they've already been completed by the Board of Supervisors.
Do we have a second on that?
Oh, I'll go ahead and second that.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Okay, then that's going to be archived. So being that it's going to be archived, we're not going to see that on the next report, okay? All right, the next one, employee efficiency study. The status on that looks like there's been, what is the response on that? We got 27 items completed. Let's take a look at that. Employee efficiency study. If everybody could take a look at that, and if they have any comments on that and the 27 that have been completed. Yeah, number 2, administratively closed. Do you want to, does anybody want to come?
So
Number 10 is partial.
number 2, I'm assuming Nick and Melanie decided to administratively close this one. Do you want to discuss it? Number 2 was that the recommendation dealt with how many times they have to go to IFC to be able to get permission to fill a position. And so the recommendation from the audit, so is that originally because we were short with money, so you couldn't fill a position automatically because you were worried about finances in the city, and so you had to come to IFC to fill it? And what's the reason to continue that process instead of, if it's an authorized position, let the particular department fill it?
Sure. For the record, Nick Morano, City Manager. I'm going to take advantage of the fact that Nancy stepped out of the room to use her supporting material. That's absolutely correct. This was a procedure that was put in place during the last downturn. As you know, one of the main tools that the city has to control expenses is to either put a freeze or take a very hard look at every new hire. The recommendation from the efficiency study was that we eliminate this procedure. So, for example, if there's an already budgeted position and it's filled, and that particular employee either moves on or retires or for whatever reason creates a vacancy in a budgeted position, the recommendation from the efficiency study was that that position should not then need IFC approval for the department director to go out and rehire for it. I considered it. It's not popular among my department directors. But I wanted to keep this procedure in place because it's really the only method I have that if I need to clamp down on expenses, I can keep the position vacant in order to control costs. We don't belabor these. It's not an ordeal. It is 10 minutes out of a department director's morning to come to IFC. But I do think I wanted to keep this particular procedure in place. We keep the burden low, and I understand, I understand the validity of the recommendation, but I really do want to keep this one in place.
So my general question on that one is I just want to make sure that we're not incurring more overtime to fill the vacant slot void while they're waiting. So are we talking about a 1-week delay because they're waiting? I just want to make sure that the measure doesn't cost us more money by paying those in the existing positions overtime to meet the need, because I'm
Yeah,
assuming the positions are needed.
Sure,
in the
that's
first
a
place.
great
That's
question.
the
In
issue.
most cases, with either an employee who is given notice or an employee who's going to retire, we actually grant approval before that person even leaves. So I don't have a percentage, but in the vast majority of cases, the incumbent is still on the job and the department has approval. There are cases where people walk off the job, and in that particular case, sure, it's possible it could be, a 3 or 4 day delay until the IFC meets the following week to approve it. But they're really the exception.
Okay, are there any other comments on this particular line item, the employee efficiency study?
Oh, we've got several, so.
Well, that's why, yeah. It's kind of looking at the ones that are...
Employee efficiency study, item number 7, that refers to grants. Now, I know the city has now appointed a person to do grants management. In the discussion at that supervisors meeting, there seemed to be some emphasis on control, as I remember when we talked here in the audit committee about grants. There was a concern that some of the spending that was granted in the grant, does that make sense? Yeah, may not be proper. And the supervisors seemed to spend more time on getting more grants written than control on the spending that was going on there. Now, I don't know whether the new administrator gets to look at spending before it's approved or not. If not, it seems like we're sort of working from behind on proper spending on these things. So it's an internal control thing, and I know it's good we got a person there to take a look at it, but there's more to the job than writing grants, I think.
So, Don, are you recommending that we keep number 7 open, that we keep that as an open item to see what happens after the grant position and the audit report comes out, that we're not satisfied it's met yet?
See, this one was number 7 was to get a person appointed, and they did that. One of the internal control items points out that grant spending could be a problem if the money isn't properly spent. And so there's an internal control item, I think, down here somewhere.
So we'd keep it open in the internal control review,
Yes.
but not in this section?
Right, I think that's correct. Because
We're leaving...
5, 10, and 14.
Yeah, 5 and 10, let's see, 14, yeah, and 14. And, let's see, we had,
And the rest we can move to the board.
yeah. Okay, so do I have a motion on that? Let's have a motion.
So I move to accept the report on the employee efficiency study and move it to the Board of Supervisors for final acceptance, with the exception of number 5, 10, and 14.
I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. I think as we're doing this too, Mark, when we go before the board, and this is just these ones that are closing up, they should have a report on just the ones we're addressing and letting them know what our recommendations. So you just basically pull these off of here, copy it, take off the open ones and saying, these are the ones that we're closing. That way the board can do what we're doing. If they want, they can look at these items and send it back if they have a question or if not. So I think what we're doing is we're setting up a process here so that we're going through it much more efficiently from this point forward, and then they will too. So if we can get that report developed, that would be great. All right, going down to the next one, then we're talking about the internal.
So, just to clarify, so for example, on the employee efficiency study, the report for the board would reflect 24 of the findings, not 5, 10, and 14.
Correct. It wouldn't even show those others open.
Right.
And we would have that. I think since the board originally was part of the plan implementation, they know that all 27 are out there, so we just want to give it to them when it's completed. And then once it's all, I think that's probably a most efficient way to handle that. Okay, going on to the next one, internal controls review. There's 41 items, and 7 are completed.
I'd like to make the suggestion that we don't act on this
I agree.
one. It's too soon in the
And
process.
they're piece,
I agree,
partial, partial.
yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah, so we're going to
Keep this one.
So we'll just keep that, so it'll show up on the next report. If there have been no changes, 41 reported findings and still 7. There's just not far enough, there's not enough, they haven't gone far enough along to call anything really completed. Last one is the CAFR, and it looks like that's all been resolved, has been taken care of. Do you have any comments on that?
Well, it's kind of odd, this situation where we've got, apparently, some of these actually had not been resolved by the department. So I don't know if this really fits unless we just turn around and issue another finding on the 2015 CAFR. And maybe that's the way to deal with it, so it keeps moving, but
Yeah, so I'm saying,
I'd leave it open for now, I would think.
well,
Would be best.
are we really looking at the 2014 CAFR, or are we really addressing the 2015 now?
Yeah, the 15, but
Right.
this is an issue that came up in the 14.
But the 15 reviews the outstanding ones, so
Correct.
it would pick these up anyway if they're an
Yes.
outstanding issue. So
Right.
for that reason,
Correct.
I'm not sure why we'd leave a 2014 CAFR open, because if it's a recurring issue, it'll come back in the 2015 CAFR. We'll see it again anyway, so
So I
hopefully,
I
hopefully they're
support
not.
the consensus with it. I could live with the 2015 CAFR
Mhm.
issues.
And finish the 2014.
Because these are just going through the Board of Supervisors. So,
Correct. So if you're ready, I'll make a motion to,
Look, excuse me, before you do that, just to make sure that that's what you want to do. So, Bill, from the question that you asked earlier, so are you inferring, surmising, relaying that there is some information that would indicate that some of these are not, that haven't resolved the issue?
it's a verbal statement, it is not written, and that written report won't be out until January, December, January. So, to me, you could stick that back in the archives for this one,
Well,
because if it turns out, it's not a completed process. This was just, so this particular one, we are done with 2014.
Well, I guess as the external audit liaison, right? And if you, I was just thinking, if you have some basis for thinking that something here hasn't done the trick, hasn't done what it needs to do, I don't know that you want to close that, because then you're saying you're satisfied with it.
What we're closing is through the Board of Supervisors level.
Yeah,
Right.
I
We're
know,
not-
but
well, let me clarify.
You know what I'm asking? I'm trying to help you.
I do. I have kind of where you're going here. So the indication might be that you always keep maybe as a policy, we always keep one prior CAFR plus the next one to determine that the action met the CAFR correction. And maybe, you're always having two CAFRs, and then you're moving one off and putting in the next one to be able to say, all right, yes, indeed, or I'm assuming what's going to happen is we're going to get another hit on a federal grant that says we didn't properly report something. And so then we could, as the audit committee, maybe come up with a different recommendation to say, we still haven't done it, or we didn't hire that grant person, or this corrective action that we took this year was so late, like one of them was April, and so maybe the problem had occurred prior to the implementation of the correction to the prior CAFR. So there can be timing issues. That means you get it again for 2015 because you made the correction too late.
I think it covers the issue.
Yeah, so maybe we
That would
just,
be a systematic way to do it.
Yeah.
right, and then you're always,
Just a minute. There's a status comment column on this thing, and there are no status comments. Now, we said this stuff was done, but I'm always a suspicious old man. Did it really get done? So what is the status?
Well, I think Mark just said a little bit ago that, dump it on Nancy.
Not dump it. She's the higher authority here.
Nancy Paulson, Chief Financial Officer for Carson City. We actually haven't received any formal findings from our auditors for fiscal 15 for the single audit. And therefore, the departments haven't even been able to do their plan of corrective action or what was the word I was, submit their responses to the findings. And one of the findings, I believe, that they might have discussed with Bill is that there was a finding from last fiscal year, but since it was fixed during this current fiscal year, they will still consider that a finding.
In which case, for 2014 is what you're talking about. It's
Right,
still-
there was a finding for 2014, and
And this
since
would be
it wasn't
2015.
corrected until the middle of fiscal 15,
Right.
they will still consider it a finding on the fiscal 15.
I like the rollover idea. In other words, leave it open through the next audit, because I didn't ask him about which specific ones. We were talking kind of generally, but he did say there were 2 or 3 that would repeat. So,
Well, does this mean that actual completion date doesn't mean anything?
No, that was the actual date that the finding was corrected, but it may be a finding on the financial statements that they're auditing right now because it wasn't corrected until the middle of fiscal 15.
so they could have had an error in July or August of last year because they didn't correct it till September. So the auditor's going to say, whoops, you still had an error in July because you didn't get it corrected. So I think just leaving it open to comparison-wise is perfectly fine, and no reason to send the 2014 CAFR to the board yet.
I think, right?
Okay, so just to recap that, well, that was great. I think we're after a couple of years, we're getting this report to start to work for us, and this is probably what we should have done a while ago. But I guess in our next report, then after we have the board acceptance, we'll see that column, and then these things will start to go off. And I'll get a copy of that. The board will have a copy of it. And that way, if they have any questions on those items, they can talk with us about it at that time. And if not, then these things are closed. All right, any more comments or questions before we move on to the next agenda item? Okay. Agenda item number 8, discussion update regarding the progress of the city's performance measurement implementation. Could you please give us an update on that, Mark?
I was going to, Nick, I just wanted to ask, do you, sorry, can't see it. Do you want to just give the update? Because I'm happy to, but you obviously can give more detail, or Michael.
Doesn't matter what I do. Yeah. You sure? Okay. Easy enough.
Deferring to a higher authority.
I don't think so. I don't know about that. Hello, everybody. Michael Saloga. I'm the Business Development Manager for Carson City, for the record. To let you know kind of where we're at with the performance measurement system selection, kind of take you back just a little bit. I don't want to tell too long of a story. But basically, September and October spent quite a bit of time traveling, and one of those trips was to the ICMA conference in Seattle. I actually spent time with 3 specific companies that were vendors there that provide this type of software. And while I was meeting with them in person, Eric was our CIO, was doing his due diligence essentially from behind a computer screen. So based on that, we've selected Socrata to be the software company of choice for a couple of different reasons. One is that visually they actually provide the best, I guess from a website perspective, the best visuals that you're going to see between the 3 different companies that we looked at. Also, too, from a technical support standpoint, they are going to be coming into our shop here probably within the next month or 2, and are going to be providing us with assistance on how we are going to actually get data from systems that are already in place, and not as we had done with active strategies in the past, where people were spending days and weeks within different departments entering data manually or using spreadsheets. They're going to be helping us to pull data from existing systems that will make it, basically from your perspective, a great audit trail. The other part of it is that Socrata actually has a strategic relationship with SunGard, our provider for our financial systems, and so they already know exactly most of where a lot of the data is going to come from and how to get to it. So from that standpoint, we felt that they were the best choice. We won't be doing any implementation here right in the near future here, because they need to come in and actually start doing some assessments. And we also have the open checkbook, the open budget and stuff that needs to get implemented first. So to let you know too, we're also going to be developing, some of you probably already know, we are redoing our website. And so one of the things that we're looking to redo on the website, which should hopefully make you all happy as well, is to have a button on the home menu that's called Transparency. And they'll be able to go to that, see the open budget, see the open expenditures, see Carson Connect, and also see the performance measurement tab, where they'll be able to go and see for each department. There's also another company that we're talking to, and we've got a proposal from, that will let the little bit of the cat out of the bag on this one. It's called FlashVote, and it's a company that's actually a tenant at the Adams Hub. They're based out of Incline Village, and what they do is they allow you to do online surveying. And so we have a number of issues. We have to create some policies and procedures around that, but the idea here is that we can continually be able to do online surveying so we can get immediate impact from the community on all of our transparency initiatives. So
yeah, that really sounds encouraging, and it seems like this is starting to really kind of come together. What is the timeline as far as when this is going to be fully implemented, and what are some of the steps in between? Like you mentioned a few of the things, but are we going to be having this thing fully implemented by the end of this fiscal year? Is it, okay, so that really going into the next fiscal year, we'll have this, it'll be up on the web, we'll have the information, we'll have the performance measures and all identified and tracking, and then at that point, we as audit committee, I think one of the tools we'll have now in assessing where to look at is from an internal control standpoint would be maybe some departments that were maybe in the yellow or red categories that may signal a problem, but we would then be able to have that information to be able to readily do that, correct?
Right, and the issue with identifying the different specific measures that we're going to choose will depend on a number of things, and one of them is the ease of the access of the data, as well as what does the community want to see. And so we'll actually also be doing some outreach to folks to say, here's our first blush at what measures we want to present. What do you think? What's important to you? So we would expect that we would get input from a number of different sources related to that. And yes, it will be a red, yellow, and green type of a response back as a reporting on the website.
So these measures, then we will all be able to see what the measures are for each of the different department. We'll have that up front.
And actually, the way it will probably be presented won't necessarily be by department. It will be by function. Because when people think of things like when I need to get a business license, they're not sitting there thinking it goes through community development. I want to know how many days does it take me to get my business license? So,
and when we're talking about this fiscal year, will this information include the 15-16 year, or are you saying that it's going to be implemented and we'll start tracking and having data beginning in the next fiscal year?
When we get a chance to evaluate the data and essentially where it's all going to fit in, we'll determine whether it's going to be this current fiscal year or not. More than likely, it will be.
Great. All right, excellent. Any other comments or questions?
Well, I'm curious about costs.
Sure. At this point, there are some costs, like for the voting thing, that we have yet to work out proposals with. With Socrata, I think our best guess is around $20,000 a year. 25,000. Thank you, guys. That's for the performance measurement part of it alone. Actually, Eric would probably be a better person to answer some of those questions, because most of the stuff is coming out his budget, so, which I don't have visibility to, so.
What was that part?
So the open budget, open expenditures, how much is that costing us?
The open budget, open expenditures was 28.
So 28,000 for the open budget, open expenditures, and another 25 for the performance measurement.
The total between the two is like 39, once we add it all together.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I guess part of the cost, this is all going to be incorporated. They're going to be able to extract this information. So there's going to be very little, I'm assuming, cost on the part of staff in gathering this information. It's all going to be pretty much linked to the accounting system.
That's the objective. It really, again, this is where you try and marry what we are currently collecting with existing systems with what the needs of the community are.
Right, and so therefore these numbers are all going to be, in a sense, coming under these are numbers already in the system, so they're, in a sense, audited numbers. They're numbers that we're looking at normally. It's not like somebody having to come back and try to gather information. It's pulling it all out.
Right. In the case of finance, it'd be coming out of SunGuard. If it's the Sheriff's Department, they've got their systems. If it's courts, there's Court View. It just really depends on, the nature of those systems and what kind of audit trails are already in place with those systems.
Okay, and the amounts are annual?
Yes.
Yes.
Are there any upfront costs beyond that?
No, it's software as a service. So we're buying, the upfront cost, I think there was like $2,800 for our interface to our SunGuard system. And that's the extent of our.
Are there any cost savings? In other words, are there other systems that you can shut down, or is layered on top?
This is on top. This is providing a new service. So
Okay.
we don't provide those services currently.
Thank you.
If I can recall too, Eric, aren't we, as part of the whole technology process, also doing something about recording the meetings?
Yes.
We've made some other changes, and the net cost to the taxpayer, when we look at all of the changes that we've made, the taxpayer's not going to have additional expenditures, because we're eliminating some and replacing it with this. So I think that, again, what we've done is we tasked the staff to come up with more effective and efficient methodologies to be able to produce all of this documentation. And I think, Eric, I did say in the newspaper that I wanted to thank you. And so I might as well do it personally, too, that I think you're doing a great job looking for ways to utilize technology to meet needs while keeping the cost effective. And so that the taxpayer's not going to be having a higher budget. We're going to transfer whose budget some things are in, but overall, I think the cost is almost negligible to what we're spending. So we're very pleased.
How are the department heads feel about this?
I think pretty good so far. The only one that's been infecting right now is Nancy right now. So she's been heavily involved.
The finance department's fine with it. It just comes straight out of our system, so we don't have to, update any information.
Well, and I can speak to the fire chief, basically. He was one of those departments where he had a staff member spending an entire week every quarter entering data, and he's basically saying, thank you, appreciate that. So.
Is this going to be tested after you've installed it, or?
Yeah, it's in test mode right now, currently. We're looking to go live in the next 2 to 3 weeks with the open budget, open expenditure. So we're actually in the final testing phases right now.
Okay, good, thank you.
Well, I'm very pleased to hear what the city has been doing, what the city manager's done, put together. This is really kind of a little bit beyond my expectations, especially with being able to extract this information. It's all, all integrated. And we're looking at it really having some real information here in the next year, so that's great. Just thank you all for your hard work on that. Is there any comment from the public at this time? Okay, no other comments. We'll move on to item number 9, report from Vice Chair William Prowse regarding his meeting with ID Bailey and our external auditors. You're on, Bill.
Will be relatively short and sweet. Let's see, I met with Dan Carter, who's partner in charge of the 2015 CAFR audit for the city. And the audit was going well. One of my questions was how well the transition went after Nick retired and Nancy took over, and he said just very smoothly. And he had one of the areas, there were 2 areas I wanted to discuss a little bit. One was internal controls. There was a concern, as I remember, in our last meeting maybe, that the external auditor, since they do an internal control review, that review should be adequate for the internal auditors. And that's the functions and the objectives of the external auditors are quite a bit different than the internal auditors. And except for grants, in which case the federal grant system requires what they call a single audit, and is done annually on the grants, but when it comes to the rest of the government, it's a much more, I shouldn't say, it's not in as much depth, and they are doing their work to see how it relates to the accuracy of the financial statements. So, anyway, it is very important, and that the internal auditors work with the external auditors. That area could be beefed up a little bit based on our conversation. Let's see. So the other area which is coming down the road is GASB 68, which has identified roughly $75 million worth of additional liability that would be applied to the annual financial statements this year. And next year, there'll be, that would be for the PERS program. Next year will be for other personnel benefits. Between the two, as I understand, we're probably looking, literally 150 million or more by next year. And that will, is very similar to what's happening in a number of other cities and counties. So the impact on us will be awkward, but there shouldn't hopefully be any tremendous problem. And I wanted to mention that the prior director of finance helped Carson adopt the trust fund to help pay for the, yeah, and Ms. Paulson mentioned that she thought about $250,000 has already been submitted in the special account, which I think is commendable. So since we're all very tired, I'll cut it off. I could go for a while, but not today. So I think we should end up with a good CAFR. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Vice Chair Prowse, for taking the time and going over that with them, and I do appreciate that. And yeah, I know GASB 68 is the big buzzword and the big concern, but everybody's having to deal with that. So it's actually good that we're showing that liability, and helps cities and counties to know that they need to fund that sometime if it ever became a realized liability. Any public comment at this time? Okay. All right, agenda item number 10, scheduling the next meeting. I think in scheduling our next meeting, I guess I have to turn to you, Mark, and say, when do you think, when we'll be at a good point where we'll have enough information? I think we're looking at that, the cash and revenue collection, when that's probably going to be close to completed, and the policy and I don't know about the cash and collection. I guess the policy and procedure should probably be done within the next month or so, you said. So when do you think we'll be at a point where it'll be worthwhile to have a meeting and get an update?
Well, we could either, well, I'd say not December, right? So we're talking January or February, I would suggest. And I think if, unless you're feeling anxious to get together sooner than later, I would probably suggest February, because that will be a quarter. We could do a findings tracking update with our new and most recently improved version of the report. Certainly can report back on the policies and procedures, and should have plenty, if not completed, to report back on the cash and revenue. So I think I'd suggest February.
Okay, yeah. So if everybody's, I don't have my calendar in front of me, and I'm thinking we typically do this, what, about the second Tuesday? Oh, okay. Well, it's not my calendar. So I might have some on that day, but yeah, February 9th, would that work for everybody?
So long as it's in the afternoon, because we have health accreditation in the morning.
Yeah, I think what we do is, this was as an accommodation to Mr. Stranka,
yes,
that we
was.
made it
Thank you.
early, but normally it'd be 3 o'clock would be our standard time for meetings, so does that work for everybody?
Well, or 5, unless you were trying to do the 5, just.
We were trying that, and it just seems like every time we try to do that, somebody's using the room. Did you want to, we could try for 5, and if we can't, we can go to 3, but it seems like every time we've done that, we've had a hard time getting the room.
Yeah, it doesn't matter to me, so, for
Okay.
sure.
Would everybody would like to go with trying for 5 o'clock, and then if that's not available, we'll just go to 3?
Sure.
Okay, all right, then we'll
Okay,
go
so
ahead and
February
set
9th.
February 9th at 5 o'clock, and if that is not working out, we'll go to the 3. And,
I had one question here. We've talked a lot about revising or adding or creating policies for how we do our work and interact. Is there anybody writing all this stuff down?
I have taken notes, but I don't know if I took the notes that you want to take.
maybe what Bill is asking is, as you're doing the policies and procedures, maybe you need to look at us.
Well,
Tracking document.
Yeah, the tracking, I mean, really, there's some things that we don't want to lose, what we're doing as we go along, and then maybe just a very brief, it could just be a single page of just how we're tracking and we're doing these things.
Well, we
And-
do have a policy on fraud, waste, and abuse, and
Right.
that can be amended. and
Yeah.
We're bringing
added
back
to.
next
We're bringing back that at the next meeting, yet that will be on the
Right.
agenda for the next meeting to amend that, so board members looking at that. But yeah, maybe as part of the policy procedures, maybe some of these things, you know, and you're reporting to us, so if we can get that documented in writing, it would be good.
The interaction with the Board of Supervisors, I think, would help clarify.
sorry, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure you know, Bill. What's in place that directs the role? Is there a charter Audit Committee charter?
No, we've got the law, the municipal code, and there
Right.
is a city charter. I don't know if I've got it all, but it's on the web. And we've got a long list of things we're supposed to be doing,
Yeah.
such as, recommending hiring the single auditor every 3 years.
Right.
And
I think what we're looking for is just some of our procedures, how we go about implementing some of those things. So we've got the law, but it's just a matter of our procedures.
Okay, so would you like me to just put together a little 1 to 2 page?
Yeah, that's it. That would be good, just so we have something done. And then
Do we have bylaws?
no, we don't have bylaws, we just have the charter.
Because generally, that's how you accomplish the procedural portion of what you're going to do, is you create
Right, and that's why I was
bylaws for your
asking
committee
what
that
was in
says how
place.
often you're going to meet, and you're going to have elections of chairman every whatever month, and blah, 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 blah.
yes, I've never seen one.
Okay, so I guess procedures, they'll get in a little bit more detail than you would with bylaws, but come up with something.
Sure.
You've been part of this process long enough, you say, but I think it would be valuable, because that way too, when there are questions, and again, as committee members change, we'll be able to carry that on for the future. I think that's one of the things we want to look at is, in the last few years, we've really been building a committee that is really going to, we don't want this to all go away when people change. And I think that's why I keep hanging around. I'm waiting until I feel like we're at that point that it can be handed off and it still function effectively. Great. So we've got that. Is there any other comments?
Just related to that, one of the things is in the interaction between the audit committee, the internal auditor, this board of supervisors, management, the Attorney General's office.
Well, and the process is, well, and it's documenting that process, because I know we've stood before the Board of Supervisors, and they weren't too clear what the processes should be, and that when we do go through and have an audit finding, it's being reviewed by management, staff's looking at that, then it's coming back to audit committee, then it's going to the board. It may not always go in that order because we don't meet as often as the board does, but at one point, all three of us have to take a look at it. If the board does agree on something and maybe we take a look at it afterwards, we may say, hey, there's something that they may not have considered. So we may open something up and go back to them. So I think we do need to get that sign off from both sides.
I did put a little, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I did put a little process together on the CAFR and the interaction with the external auditor that I'll be happy to share.
So maybe if we had something of that before our next meeting, if that would be possible, we could take a look at that, and we'll have that on the agenda item to take a look at that. That's our own policy and procedures.
Have you seen the Carson City Board Commissions and Committees and Commissions Policy and Procedure?
I don't,
This was
yeah.
published in 2012.
Okay. I'll get a hold of it. Thank you.
Okay, is there any public comment at this time? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. All those in favor? A second? Okay, second. Okay, I got lost in all that. Was that seconded? We got a second?
Yeah, I seconded it.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, all those opposed? Everybody wants to go to lunch. This meeting is closed.